As the host, I don't see that. All right. Welcome to the second Newcomer tournament, Group C, Game 3. I'm Philophanic with my co-caster, Black Magic.
Hello there.
And in-game, we have Mr. Steamfist, Dr. Yang, and Grayus G, and J to the 2. What do you think about this map, Black Magic?
So, this one is a power colony. Based on the distribution of resources, I think fuel is going to be it's kind of a rough terrain. Fuel might end up being kind of big for, because they're only, I see, J to the 2 already takes the spot up there. There's another carbon spot over to the
To the right of that.
Yes.
Just north of the colony.
I would found right next to, well, pretty much there. There we go.
Decent found by Mr. Steamfist. I'd like to see him grab 2 of those carbon.
An expansive
and maybe
HQ
an
has been
aluminum.
founded.
We have another expansive, Andreas, down over here on the right side of the colony.
And that's a decent found because you can use ice and you're expansive.
A scavenger HQ has been
the
founded.
last person, Dr. Yang, found scavenger. I'm not as partial to that particular found. I can understand why they did it to be right next to the aluminum. I think what I would have done instead, there's some aluminum to their north, kind of near the colony, that I would have found it next to. The other option is to get close to that water in the southwest and just take the low aluminum right next to them. Most of the time, if you take a low aluminum, people won't bother to nuke you, and then you have it right next to your base. Meanwhile, you have your water tiles right there. So either one of those might have been a little bit better, but not a bad spot.
It's both scavenger players jumping out to the early level 2, as we'd expect, with Dr. Yang founding late, getting that extra cash, and then Mr. Steamfist with a decent scavenger spot. And right on schedule, the expansives upgrade to level 2 also.
I would say just taking a look at everything. I think out of all of the spots, I like J to the 2s the best. Now, the negative about that, I'm not really sure why they went into carbon with their HQ. Well, it looks like they still have all their claims to go through?
Three claims.
They still have 3 claims, so you've got to get that down. So they started getting their steel down. I don't really agree with going with carbon at HQ2. Actually, that was an HQ1 claim for carbon.
So
the reason I don't
less.
So, not only do you not want to do that HQ1, but think of it this way. Even if carbon is very expensive, when you start selling that down, you make it cheaper and cheaper for your scavengers to upgrade.
Right.
And so instead, if you look at J to the 2, the power price is very expensive, that's true, but you founded first and you got 45,000 in debt. You're never going to be able to pay that off in time. So at this point, just maybe throw up 1 wind turbine, but get into something that's going to make you some money. And I think that what I would have preferred was getting a triangle of steel down, and then try to get something like some reactors would have farms, something like that. Maybe a little bit of water next to their base.
Dr. Yang, despite having a suboptimal founding location, has gone to level 3 really quick. He has 2 wind turbines, one of them's goon, which is good. And then apparently there's a little bit of lag going on, but I don't seem to be experiencing it on my end.
So they've got oh wow. I don't see any lag on my end, so interesting. So this is looking at Dr. Yang's configuration. There is a single electrolysis reactor over there. What I would like to see is that reactor moved 1 spot to the left, and then you can trade off some of this aluminum and get 2 buildings together.
Right, get that adjacency bonus, because he won't need a high and a medium aluminum.
Worth noting, though, that they're already consumed. I think I would rather see that go into food, though, because right now Dr. Yang can't make any money. Can't really make any money off of those reactors because they're consuming about one. They're consuming 1 fuel per second just from sending all of that carbon and the far distance for the water. I think if you go into food and move that over to take up one of those aluminum tiles, the nice thing about that is you would be positive on food and you could start making a little bit of money on this. Right now he's not making any money by having, even if he had 2 electrolysis reactors, that would be questionable as to whether he would actually make any money.
Right, although it's not hurting his upgrades as he continues to be the first to upgrade into level 4. Let's look at Andreas G really quick. I don't think we've looked at him yet.
And so 41k in debt. I see that Andreas is going relatively hard into power.
And carbon. He has 3 claims in carbon,
and they're far away.
Far away. Now, the Expansive does have a slight advantage in shipping costs. Their shipping costs are 1/3 less than everyone else, but he will not. That is way too much carbon, and that shipping cost will not be enough.
So my thought is Andreas maybe thought about going into all that carbon to get those 3 wind turbines up, but the problem is the same problem we were talking about earlier with J to the 2 is eventually you're going to get to a point where the carbon price is going to crash and you're just making it cheaper and cheaper, and that's part of the reason why both of our expansives, interestingly enough, went into carbon, and that just made it that much cheaper for Dr. Yang and Mr. Steamfist to get into quick upgrades. So
this Pleasure Dome auction is going to go for 20k, which with 2 expansive players and 2 scavenger players, that should be a pretty profitable. Yes, getting 220
seconds. Yeah.
And that is without virtual reality, which would increase that. So I'd say that was $20,000 well spent.
That was worth even more than 20,000, based on the fact that if you look at the way that the colony is growing, the colony is getting a little limited at this point, and there's no other location for a Pleasure Dome in there. That was definitely worth a lot more. That was a good pickup by Mr. Steamfist.
So we have over at J to the 2, we just got a mutiny on a greenhouse farm, which is now auto-off, but not doing anything for the mutiny owner, and then another greenhouse farm which was dynamited.
Yes. I don't agree with the dynamite, of course. When you're dynamiting farms and things like that, I would have rather, if somebody's gonna dynamite something and go after J to the 2, you go after one of those wind turbines.
Right.
To make it awkward. But honestly, I don't think I would use dynamite at all. I would use what I would use is the underground nuke. If you're going after J to the 2, that's one of the negatives about taking that medium water pump there, and I would have potentially foregone the medium water pump entirely and just gone with ice condensers, now they're called solar condensers, right next to your base. That way people can't nuke it, it's right next to your base, and you can switch out of it very easily.
Correct. We did have a nuke go off, at least one, on Dr. Yang's elemental quarry, which is now a low.
And we have a mutiny by Mr. Steamfist on Dr. Yang's farm. I don't necessarily agree with this. Whenever you're looking, unless you have teleportation, it's not a good idea to mutiny a single tile. What ends up happening is you have to ship the base resource out there in order to take advantage of it, and you can see the water truck is finally getting there.
Right.
By the time that mutiny ends, you wouldn't have gotten anything out of it, and furthermore, it's only making a net of -$1.
Yep. So that is not worth it, especially with fuel so high. 128. Mr. Steamfist recently got up to level 5. He has a patent lab, which he patented financial instruments. Doesn't appear to be researching anything in that patent lab at the moment.
I don't know that I agree with a patent lab right here, with the exception of if you were to happen to get teleportation. So it's relatively cheap to build the patent lab, but going into those patents is relatively expensive with the chemicals at 202. I guess if you're a scavenger, I'm okay with it because it's so cheap to build the patent lab. But anything else, anything else, I don't think I agree with it. Well,
Financial Instruments isn't the worst patent because Andreas is in B debt right now.
Yes.
He won't be making any money from Dr. Yang and a little bit from J to the 2 in B debt. How the Financial Instruments patent work is, as you can see, it's 25% of the interest tick. So Andreas will be paying around 30,000 in a debt tick, and Mr. Steamfist will get a little bit under 10k of debt.
I think based on value, this is what I would do is I would think about either teleportation if you can afford it, or more important than that, I would think about going for water engine. Water engine is only it only costs 40 chems, and you can essentially start profiting from that fuel price.
Right now we have attempted an early buy by Andreas G on Dr. Yang. Dr. Yang has been EMP'd on most of his buildings, so he's not making much money right now. If he sold everything, he would almost have enough to buy that one last stock. He just needs 2k more to defend himself.
That's actually really surprising. And they do have the buy if they want it. J to the 2 can contribute. There we go. That was pretty surprising. I didn't see that coming.
Not see an early aggressive move. Now that'll help Andreas a little bit with his stock boost, but you can see that D-interest, his stock price continues to go down despite having that boost from buying out Dr. Yang.
So that was a really good buy. It was a good move by Andreas to go after somebody that couldn't defend themselves, because otherwise you're going to death spiral. Your base price is about 750. And then the stocks owned is 1377, so that's going to prop up the price. And in terms of people to buy, that's not necessarily a bad that's not a bad investment. They don't have that poor territory. It's actually pretty decent.
Yes. Now, Andreas is in a little bit of trouble with 300k in debt at the moment. I'd like to see him pay that down if he could. Otherwise, he may, even with that buy, he may debt spiral out of the game.
I'm thinking when you get to 300k at this point, so you're not going to be making a ton of money off of Dr. Yang anytime soon. The way for Andreas to get back into this is an Offworld is 51k. If you can hologram an Offworld, I say if you started to pay your debt down right now, you're at 306. If you take all of your cash and resources, you're still at 250. You're going to hit that again. At this point, just forget about your debt and just go. Try to get an Offworld. Try to get another buy. Having stock in Dr. Yang is going to be good enough. You're not going to be. Unfortunately, they wouldn't be able to get the buy on Mr. Steamfist is going for an Offworld.
He might need to cancel that in order to defend himself.
That's actually not a bad move by Andreas, because if they keep going far enough,
their D debt will be irrelevant if they own enough for everyone else.
So Mr. Steamfist needs to cancel that Offworld.
Cancel that Offworld, he could defend himself right now and be in a good spot.
But that Offworld's it's at 80%.
That Offworld, I note, it's also not hologrammed. With 3k holograms, there's absolutely no reason not to build it. Maybe somewhere else in hologram, that Offworld. Maybe other players won't notice. He did secure the defense, though.
He did, and that is a 30% interest tick for 96k.
Which Mr. Steamfist got 25k worth of that.
So here's what you need to do. If you're Andreas, your path forward is sell out of Mr. Steamfist right now and put up your own Offworld. Unfortunately, you can't defend it, but, and I don't think that... Does Andreas have any holograms?
No, he does not have any holograms.
Ooh. So, unfortunately, what ends up happening is as soon as I don't see a way forward for Andreas because you've got 426k in debt, so you're not getting out of debt. You can't buy a hologram, unfortunately, because you're in D debt. You don't have Cook the Books, and so if you throw up an Offworld at this point, everybody either dynamites it or does a mutiny. So the lesson for this one is try to see if you can buy at least one early Offworld, even though money is kind of tight early on. If he had it, I'm sorry, not a hologram. Yeah, a hologram. So if he had at least one hologram somewhere near his base or somewhere on the map, right next to the colony, he would be able to throw up an Offworld and he would still be okay. Unfortunately, keeping his stock in Mr. Steamfist, he's never going to be able to get to that buy because you just don't have enough on-world. So the best thing you can do is sell out now.
Right. Sell out now, get an off-world, maybe hope J to the T and Mr. Steamfist fight each other. But it's a little bit late for that.
Actually, what I would do is sell out of Mr. Steamfist and throw a Hail Mary pass by EMPing J to the 2 and just see if you can get that last stock.
That's true. J to the 2 only recently got to level 5. Starting to make money now, but doesn't have that much cash on hand. Just looking at his base really quick, he has some chems, which are making 94 seconds, and farms at 43, electrolysis, which isn't making much money, and he still only has 2 steel mills.
Correct.
Which hurt his upgrade speed.
And so the you've got a metal mine going up, which is decent in order to be able to get that iron price, take advantage of the iron price. But unfortunately, if you notice J to the 2's configuration, those 2 wind turbines up there came very early, and he was never able to pay off any amount of debt in order to take advantage of it. So early on, this is good for newer players. Think of what you can do early on to make money. See if you can progress to, the biggest hump is get to HQ3 and get to HQ4. Then you can start worrying about a little bit of your debt. If you go into things like power when you have a bunch of debt, all you're doing is making sure that your debt doesn't get any greater, but you're giving up the ability to make money on something that's on-world and profitable. So try to see if you can blaze through for upgrades to get to HQ4, 3 or 4, and then start worrying about putting up some power and things like that.
Well, right now, J to the T just bought a spy, which he has not thrown down over Mr. Steamfist's off-world, which he should have done earlier. In fact, he should buy 2 spies and put each of them over both off-world, and he would quickly notice that one of the off-worlds is undefended, and he has that cheap dynamite. He actually has one dynamite bought, so he could blow up that off-world that's just completed.
I'm looking at this, and I realized I have no idea where it came from, but Andreas G has 343k and is not that far off of a buy on Mr. Steamfist. I think putting up the second off-world for Mr. Steamfist was a mistake. Because it was so expensive. That 79k, that 80k is the difference in terms of getting a buy and not getting a buy. It may not matter because they got the launch off, but that's surprisingly close up. Bravo to Andreas G going into Silicon and making all of that money off of Silicon.
3k every 5 seconds or so on that Silicon.
Unfortunately, I just don't. As long as Mr. Steamfist notices and cancels some launches, it's gonna be enough. But Andreas, really, I'm incredibly.
He only needs 50,000 to finish this buy.
Yeah, it's 12%. I think that what'll happen is there's going to be another launch beforehand, and Mr. Steamfist will notice it. But if Andreas had stopped shipping all of that carbon, notice that Andreas has almost 1,800 carbon and is consuming an exorbitant amount, 3.2 fuel per second just because of that. If they had just stopped and turned those off, that could have been enough to swing it.
Right. In his position, it was good since he was making money. He stayed at level 4 instead of upgrading to level 5. He upgraded to level 5. I don't know if that increased production.
Might have swung it or not.
Might have swung it or not. That's kind of hard to tell. But he went for the conservative play, and it almost paid off.
So at this point, Mr. Steamfist with the 2 Offworlds. I'm surprised that Dynamite's still at 4.5k. Whenever you see Offworlds, you need to challenge those.
Yeah, and J to the T has a spy over that ungooned Offworld with a Dynamite in hand, so he should be blowing that up as soon as he put that spy down.
That definitely needs to be blown up. The negative is Mr. Steamfist really doesn't have to defend it because they have thinking machines. So there's no real point in buying a goon at that point. The Dynamite does come down, but it's a little bit too late at this point. They did buy somebody bought a goon. Oh, I guess did Mr. Steamfist buy a goon for that? Where did that goon go to? J to the 2? Oh, J to the 2 bought it to I guess they're going to go into their own Offworld, but at this point it's a little bit too late. One of the advantages of Expansive is you can get an early Offworld up cheaper than other people. So what I would have liked to see is J to the 2, while everybody else is fighting over each other, sneak a little Offworld up somewhere, and see if you can't get some of those really good launches. Oxygen's a 48k launch. Fuel is a 45k launch.
Right.
The black market is
Those
open
are
for
pretty.
business.
The prices have crept up. Mr. Steamfist right now is actually launching the wrong thing. He's launching food, which for him is a 32k launch, when he could be launching oxygen at 49k.
Yes.
Yeah, he does have auto launch on, so when you set auto launch, you need to remember to periodically check your launches and make sure that there isn't something better to launch. It won't hurt Mr. Steamfist in this particular game, but in a different game that could be. If you're in an off-world race with somebody else, that suboptimal launch could be what decides the game in the favor of the other player.
Successful off-world shipment.
Another thing I would
Make
note
room for
is
the
that Mr.
profits.
Steamfist still has chemicals online, which aren't very profitable. However,
Off-world shipment launched.
the launch for chemicals is 48k. So it is worth considering launching something like a 48k for chemicals if you just have them sitting around, and then just produce oxygen and sell it down. If some of those are close, if the prices are close, sometimes it could be worth it changing your launch, because it depends on what other people are producing. Let's say J to the 2 was very heavily into
Our
reactors.
fortune awaits.
Rather than launch the most profitable one, if you don't have enough reactors to support what you're launching, maybe consider launching something slightly less, just so you don't feed money into their pocket.
Right.
And there you have it. Mr. Steamfist takes it.
Yes.
So let's take a look, and you can see, I mean, the Offworlds for 582k were really big. I have to give it up to Andreas G, though. That was incredibly impressive to storm back despite having that much debt.
Right, that 224k in silicon, which we didn't notice. Very, very well by him. Just turn off that carbon, those that you're burning through so much fuel. If you're watching this, Andreas, you may have been able to have that buy on Mr. Steamfist.
It was so close. If you just turn off the carbon and stop burning all of the fuel, shipping things all the way across the map, I think he still could have had it. He did have 301k in interest, which is quite a sizable amount.
That is.
Which is more than he's sold regularly without auto selling.
Looking at Mr. Steamfist's entertainment revenue, as we were saying at the time, he got 208k off of that Pleasure Dome. Now I noticed sometime he did pick up the virtual reality, which increased the price of the Pleasure Dome, but that Pleasure Dome, as we mentioned, was definitely worth more than 20k.
That's not a bad 20k launch. And if I remember correctly, he was the only one that had a Pleasure Dome, right?
The AI
No,
built
the AI built a couple
some Pleasure
because they were
Domes.
right next to it, but still, I mean, that's quite impressive. Looking at black market, which is very near and dear to my heart. Andreas G was going after Mr. Steamfist. I mean, Mr. Steamfist was essentially the target. Surprisingly, that there were only 2 nukes that were used.
Right.
I would like to see. I would love to see what the nukes are used for. Maybe you could, say like it knocked down a high carbon or
yeah. The one nuke, if I remember correctly, was Andreas nuking Dr. Yang's carbon while he was going for a buy just to remove a source of income.
Ah, good.
Andreas did a nuke on Dr. Yang before he bought him, and then he also. Oh, I guess he only did the nuke. That was J to the T then who must have EMP'd Dr. Yang because, or Mr. Steamfist actually helping Andreas get that buy.
Worth note that this is completely different than our last game. There were 0 optimizations by anyone. Completely different playstyle.
Right, Mr. Steamfist wasn't punished at all for that early Offworld rush, which essentially won him the game right there. With those black market items so cheap, he really should have been hit a lot harder.
And taking a look at the resource, prices, sure enough, fuel ended up spiking almost all the way to 330, and that has to do with the map of having to ship things really, really far away. So, people that had their J to the 2 did a good job in terms of not shipping things very far with that early found. That was one of the advantages of being up there, that you're close to aluminum, you're close to water, you're close to iron. The negative portion is that J to the 2 wasn't able to capitalize by going into buildings that make money as opposed to going into the early power. So.
Right, looking at all the shipping, Mr. Steamfist also only had one long shipping for some silicon, which after he bought teleportation patent, he wasn't paying any shipping costs on that either.
Yes.
So
I really think Mr. Steamfist did a great job. Andreas G, I think, had a very strong claim that they could have taken the game, and I think that the only difference would be you don't need to take the 3 carbon all the way across the map to because that fuel cost. How much did they buy? Let's see how much Andreas bought purchased 271k in fuel.
Ouch.
And that's significant. That should be more than just about anybody else. And so not taking those carbon, keeping some of your stuff. Like if you want to take a carbon, you could take 1. But remember, when you're going against scavengers, you're only making it cheaper and easier for them to get over the hump to HQ4 and HQ5 by taking the carbon and then selling it down. So
next highest fuel was 132k by Mr. Steamfist.
Yes.
So more than double the fuel, and that's despite the expansive having 1/3 less shipping costs.
Yes. So if you don't take the carbon, you don't have that fuel cost, and you keep things around your base. I think it could have been a pretty competitive game. Plus, you don't go into nearly as much debt because they weren't. Andreas wasn't in life support for the longest time. I think also Dr. Yang had a really good start. The problem was in not defending themselves going from 4 to 5. You've always got to be careful when you go from 4 to 5. Make sure you buy a stock or 2 before you make the jump to 5, because you don't want to become vulnerable to an early buyout.
Unless you're looking around, you notice that nobody else has any money either.
Yeah, if nobody has any money, go ahead.
So quickly looking, I mean, patents really didn't win or lose this game for anyone, but I just noticed on the patent screen that Mr. Steamfist bought a lot of patents. This is something that when I was a new player and playing with new players, also noticed is they tend to buy a lot of patents. What are your thoughts on purchasing lots of patents?
I am a relatively I'm a relative big proponent of patents, but remember when you're syncing, it all depends on the map. If you've got to be careful if it's a chemical colony, you don't want to get a lot of patents because it just makes it that much more expensive to do it. If chemicals start low, by all means, you can go crazy. It's not very expensive. It'll give you advantages late game, but it's all conditional in terms of, are you a scientist? Because if you're a scientist, you can research things a lot quicker. I think that I probably would have done. I'm saying this. I don't know that I would actually do it in reality, but I think that I probably would have done 3 key patents or so, and then get out, because I think chemicals were relatively expensive for a while. So
Yeah, we can take a look at the chart really quick, and then we should get to our next game. Let's see, chemicals. Yes, chemicals were around 200 for multiple days near the end when everyone was he was researching patents.
Now this one, chemicals could have spiked even greater had optimization centers been around, but typically chemicals end up spiking later on in the game as people keep their optimizations going and they're researching the patents and things like that. So you got to be careful. Patents can essentially become a sinkhole. They help you with the late game, but if you're doing them early, and you could have all the patents you want, but then you've wasted the money there and you may not be able to defend yourself against an early buyout. So you got to be careful. They could be a slippery slope. So check the colony, check what other people are doing, and if it's a chemical colony and or if chemicals start expensive, maybe wait a little bit to get that key patent and just limit what you get.
All right, we need to go to our next game.